Before you can heal, you must understand the wound, and often that wound has roots deeper than you think. Many of our struggles, our fears, our patterns, our triggers can be traced back to one source, the relationship with our mother. She was the first voice we heard, the first face we saw, the first energy we felt. Whether she was present or absent, loving or wounded, strong or struggling, she shaped the way we see the world and ourselves. Some mothers were nurturing, others were cold, some gave too much, others were never truly there. But behind every mother is a story, a life, a pain she never spoke about. Healing doesn't mean blaming, it means understanding. You will never fully heal until you stop seeing your mother as just mother and start seeing her as a human being. A woman who may have been doing the best she could with what she had and what she knew. And when that understanding sinks into your heart, not just your mind, something inside you begins to soften. The anger fades, the resentment loosens, and the real healing begins. Forgiveness is not weakness, it's freedom. When you release the weight you've been carrying, perhaps for years, you're no longer defined by it, you rise from it. You break the cycle, you become what your mother could never be, and that is how the healing begins, not just for you, but for generations to come. Long before we understand language, before we form conscious memories, our body, our heart, our nervous system remembers our mother. She is our first connection to life. Her presence or absence becomes the emotional foundation we grow upon. If she held you with warmth, your body learned safety. If she was emotionally distant, unpredictable, or overwhelmed, your nervous system learned hypervigilance. You didn't choose this. It was imprinted into you. This is the mother wound, the invisible ache carried by many. It's the unmet need that becomes a pattern, trying to please others, fearing abandonment, feeling unworthy of love, struggling to trust, overgiving, or shutting down when emotions rise. And here's the truth. Even if your mother never intended to hurt you, it's the unmet need that becomes a pattern. Trying to please others, fearing abandonment, feeling unworthy of love, struggling to trust, overgiving, or shutting down when emotions rise. And here's the truth. Even if your mother never intended to hurt you, even if she loved you deeply, but didn't know how to show it, her own unhealed pain may have silently shaped your inner world. This wound is not about blame, it's about recognition, because until we recognize it, we unknowingly live from it. We seek validation from others to fill what was missing. We become hyper, independent, or clingy in relationships. We react not from the present moment, but from a place that was never comforted long ago. The mother wound is not just a memory, it's a pattern. One that plays out in your choices, your self-talk, and your emotional responses. And because it's so deeply woven into your earliest experience of love, it often hides in plain sight, disguised as your personality. You were not born broken, but you were born into patterns, beliefs, and emotional energy that you didn't choose. If your mother carried unresolved trauma, unhealed wounds, or suppressed emotions, they didn't just stay in her. They spilled into the atmosphere you were raised in, through tone, silence, neglect, control, or overprotection. You may have learned to dim your light to avoid her anger, to be quiet so she wouldn't get overwhelmed, to succeed in order to win her approval, and unknowingly her pain shaped your identity. It was never your fault, but it became your burden. And healing begins the moment you separate who you are from what you were taught to become. Blame feels satisfying for a while, but it does not heal, it only delays. because the moment you get stuck in blame, you give away your power. True healing comes from understanding, not just mentally, but emotionally and spiritually. Ask yourself, what was her story before she became my mother? What wounds was she carrying? What love did she never receive? Maybe she was never taught how to express love. Maybe she grew up in survival mode. Maybe she was simply repeating what was done to her. Understanding doesn't justify hurt, but it opens the door to compassion, and compassion is the beginning of transformation. We often place our mothers on pedestals or in cages. We expect them to be perfect, strong, always available, always nurturing. But before she was mother, she was a daughter, a woman, a soul born into her own pain and story. Maybe she was never allowed to cry. Maybe she had dreams that were crushed. Maybe she was emotionally abandoned long before you were born. When you take off the lens of what she should have been and see her for what she was, you unlock a higher level of awareness. You move from judgment to understanding, from disappointment to insight. What you don't heal, you repeat. Not always in obvious ways, but quietly, subtly through habits, reactions, choices. Suppressed pain from your relationship with your mother doesn't disappear. It becomes the silent script you live by. You may find yourself drawn to unavailable people. You may fear being truly seen. You may self-sabotage when love gets too close. These are not flaws, they are echoes of needs that were never met. And until you hear them, feel them, and face them, they will continue to guide your life from the shadows. Forgiveness is not for the other person. It is for you. It's not about saying what happened was okay. It's about refusing to carry it anymore. Many people resist forgiveness because they think it means forgetting. But true forgiveness is remembering without reliving. It's when you no longer bleed from a wound that's already closed. When you forgive your mother, not for her, but for your peace, you are choosing freedom over bitterness. You are choosing healing over history. It doesn't mean reconnection. It means release. And in that release, you return to yourself. You are not just healing for you. You are healing for every woman before you who was silenced, and every child after you who deserves better. When you do the inner work, when you choose to break cycles of emotional suppression, people, pleasing, self-rejection, you stop the wound from traveling further. You become the turning point in your family line. The pattern ends with you, and a new story begins from love, not pain, from presence, not projection. That is sacred work. That is legacy. Inside you lives a younger version of yourself, the child who wanted to be held, the child who wanted to be seen, accepted, loved unconditionally. That child didn't vanish. They grew up, but their unmet needs stayed behind. No external success will ever silence that inner child. No relationship, no achievement, no validation will fill the space created by early emotional disconnection. But here's the beauty: you can become the parent that child needed. You can reparent yourself with gentleness, patience, and love. You don't have to wait for your mother to change. You can give yourself what she never could. Many children become caretakers, not always physically, but emotionally. They sense their mother's sadness, anxiety, or emptiness, and try to fix it. They learn to suppress their needs so they don't add to her burden. This becomes a lifelong pattern, making others comfortable at your own expense. Being strong so others can fall apart. But healing is a personal responsibility. You are not here to carry her pain. You are not the solution to wounds you didn't create. Setting this boundary is not disrespect, for it is spiritual protection. You can hold compassion and hold distance. You can care without carrying. For years, you may have judged yourself for your triggers, your emotions, your reactions. But what if these were never signs of weakness? What if they were signals of where love was missing? The moment you begin to show compassion to yourself, to the part that overreacts, to the part that shuts down, to the part that still aches, that is when the healing begins. Because you cannot heal shame with judgment. You cannot fix pain with pressure. You can only transform what you are willing to sit with gently. Self-compassion means rewriting the voice inside you from critical to kind, from "what's wrong with me?" to "of course I feel this way, I was never taught how to feel safe." That shift is powerful. It is spiritual, and it opens the door to the version of you that was buried under years of survival. So now you understand healing is not about changing the past. It's about changing the way the past lives in you. You may never hear the apology. You may never receive the love you needed back then. But you have something far more powerful now: awareness. And with awareness comes choice. The choice to stop the cycle. The choice to forgive without forgetting. The choice to hold compassion without carrying pain. You do not heal by fixing her. You heal by freeing yourself. And when you do, you don't just rise above the wound, you rise beyond it. For yourself, for those who came before you, and for everyone who comes after you. Many people don't realize that the way their mother loved them shaped how they love themselves today. If her love was conditional, based on achievement, obedience, or emotional suppression, then you likely learned to prioritize others before yourself. You became hyper-aware of others' moods, constantly seeking harmony and afraid to disappoint. You may now confuse self-sacrifice with love and silence your own truth to avoid conflict. But healing asks you to reverse this pattern. It asks you to choose your inner peace over external approval. It asks you to sit with the guilt that comes from finally saying no, and to stop calling it love when it costs you your voice. Reclaiming your wholeness begins by realizing you do not have to abandon yourself to feel loved anymore. You are allowed to choose you not out of rebellion but out of reverence. The way your mother responded to your emotions became your internal blueprint for self-worth. If she welcomed your tears with comfort, you learned that vulnerability was safe. But if she dismissed, criticized, or ignored your pain, you may have internalized the belief that your feelings were too much, or worse, that you were too much. As a child, you didn't question her reactions. You questioned your own value. You adjusted who you were to fit what she could handle. You dimmed your light if it made her feel insecure. You silenced your truth if it caused her discomfort. This reflection became your identity, but it wasn't the truth, it was survival. And much of your adult healing begins with separating who you truly are from who you were forced to become in order to be loved. Before you could even speak, you were absorbing everything: her tone, her tension, her silence. If she was overwhelmed, anxious, resentful, or emotionally distant, those energies shaped the emotional climate of your early life. And because you depended on her for survival, you didn't just notice her wounds, you adapted to them. You tiptoed around her sadness, you overperformed for her praise, you blamed yourself for her coldness or outbursts. What she didn't say out loud, you felt in your nervous system. Her pain became your pattern. Her fear became your filter. Her emotional absence taught you to self-abandon, to seek external validation, to become hyper, vigilant and emotionally numb, all in the name of love. Many mothers grew up in environments where emotional expression was seen as weakness, where survival meant staying quiet, staying small, and never questioning authority. She may have carried her own grief, rage, and shame in silence, because no one ever gave her permission to speak it aloud. So instead of healing, she passed it on, not through intention, but through energy, behavior, and absence. You were raised not just by her words, but by everything she couldn't say. Her unspoken pain became the emotional wallpaper of your home. Her inability to comfort you may have mirrored how she was never comforted. You learned to stay quiet not because you had no voice, but because hers had long been buried under generations of silence. And without realizing it, you became the carrier of emotions that were never yours to hold. Love is often misunderstood as enough, but a child needs more than love. A child needs presence, consistency, emotional attunement. Your mother may have deeply loved you, yet been unable to give you the safety your nervous system craved. Her love may have come with unpredictability, mood swings, guilt, or control. So you learned to confuse intensity with intimacy, to chase love that hurts, or to avoid closeness altogether out of fear of being hurt again. You may still feel guilty for admitting that what you received wasn't what you needed, but the truth is, love that harms while healing is incomplete. Love that teaches fear while offering comfort creates confusion. And you've been living in that confusion ever since, questioning your worth whenever love feels unstable, or pulling away from warmth because it feels unfamiliar. If your mother relied on you emotionally, if you were the listener, the fixer, the emotional anchor for her pain, you may have become the caretaker far too early. You grew up being the strong one, the peacekeeper, the emotionally mature one in the room, while your own needs quietly disappeared into the background. You may have been praised for being wise beyond your years, but inside you were a child carrying burdens far too heavy. Now, in adulthood, you may still feel responsible for other people's emotions, ashamed of your own needs, or guilty when you choose rest over rescue. You may love deeply, but lose yourself in the process, not because you're broken, but because you were never taught that your needs matter too. There's a kind of emptiness that forms in a child not because something terrible happened, but because something essential never did. If your mother was emotionally unavailable, distracted, or consumed by her own wounds, you may have felt invisible in her presence. You learned early that your emotions were inconvenient, your needs too much, your presence unnoticed unless something was wrong. So you began to detach from your own feelings to avoid disappointment. You became who she needed you to be: quiet, helpful, self-sufficient, while burying the parts of yourself that longed to be held, seen, and celebrated. Over time, that disconnection became normal. You stopped checking in with your inner world. You became productive instead of present, strong instead of soft, agreeable instead of authentic. Some mothers, out of fear or trauma, try to protect their children by controlling them, their choices, emotions, even their identity. Maybe she constantly told you what to think, how to feel, who to be, and what not to say. Maybe every step you took outside her comfort zone was met with criticism or guilt. Over time, you internalized her voice as your own, second, guessing your intuition, downplaying your desires, living by rules that were never yours to begin with. Her control may have looked like love, but it taught you to disconnect from your truth, to equate obedience with worthiness, to suppress your authenticity in exchange for approval. When a child grows up with an emotionally unpredictable mother, survival becomes a game of hyper-attunement. You learn to study her face the moment she walks in the room. You adjust your tone, your body language, even your joy, all depending on her emotional weather. Without knowing it, you begin to shape your identity around her moods, becoming whoever she needed you to be just to feel safe. As you grew, this constant emotional scanning didn't stop. It followed you into friendships, relationships, even the way you speak to yourself. You might struggle to identify your own feelings without looking at how others are reacting. You might feel anxious in peaceful moments because chaos was your normal. And in every interaction, you may still be asking the silent question, is it safe to be me right now? When the first person you ever loved, your mother, shows love through sacrifice, suppression, or suffering, you begin to believe that love and pain are supposed to coexist. If she gave everything and left nothing for herself, you learned that love means self